We are taught that Friday the 13th is a cultural superstition, a harmless medieval myth of bad luck. It is not a myth. It is the architectural scar of a state-sponsored default. The exact date a sovereign power realized it was drowning. On October 13, 1307, the French crown executed a synchronized, overnight raid against the Knights Templar. History categorizes this as a religious purge. Systemic history records it as the first modern liquidity event. King Philip IV was not a pious crusader. He was simply a defaulting debtor, using the military to erase his creditors. But the king made a fatal miscalculation. He believed wealth was physical. He believed wealth was gold in a vault. The Templars had already engineered the great decouple. They had transformed wealth from raw matter into pure information. To fund the Crusades was to bet on a ghost. Transporting physical gold across a continent was a mathematical suicide mission. Bandits, storms, and rival kings functioned as organic taxation. The friction of movement destroyed the capital. The Templars solved this physical vulnerability with the protocol, a mechanical bypass that birthed the modern fiat architecture. A pilgrim deposits his gold at the London commandery. The gold stays in the vault. The pilgrim leaves with a cipher, a letter of credit, a heavily encrypted sigil that translated to equivalent purchasing power at the Jerusalem commandery. They realized they didn't need the gold to travel. They only needed the geometry of trust to travel. Value was no longer heavy. It was weightless. It was invisible. It became the ledger. This shift from matter to data gave the order asymmetric control. They became the first algorithmic traders. They charged extraction fees for the encryption. They arbitraged exchange rates between London and Paris. They did not just hold the currency. They became the matrix through which all capital was forced to flow. And here we find the paradox. King Philip IV, the sovereign, was suffocating in the very system he was trying to rule. His debt-to-income ratio had crossed the captivity threshold. The crown was technically insolvent. He owed the Templars millions. They were the central bank, and the king was a distressed asset. Why did the king arrest the men who guarded his own money? Because he could not pay them back. To survive, Philip initiated a liquidity event. The physical destruction of his creditors to erase his structural deficit. On Friday the 13th, the king's men breached the Paris temple. They broke the locks. They stormed the vaults. The vault was empty. The king sought physical extraction. He sought gold. He sought matter. But the Templars had achieved financial alchemy. The wealth was not in the vault. The wealth was the ledger. And the ledger had already moved. Before the raid, the Templar fleet, anchored at La Rochelle, vanished into the Atlantic. 18 ships fully loaded. Where did the Templar fleet go? The historical record is violently silent. They didn't sink. They didn't burn. They simply became liquid capital. The men were tortured and burned at the stake. The physical bodies of the order were annihilated. But the protocol survived. The mathematical truth remained intact. The more abstract the wealth becomes, the more untouchable it is for the sovereign. The king executed the men, but he could not execute the ledger. Centuries later, the Medici in Florence studied this systemic friction. They understood the trap. The Medici survived the collapse of republics because they did not hold the currency. They owned the ledger. They understood that a credit score was merely mathematics. Mathematics used to measure a vassal's captivity threshold. The exact same geometry applied to a 16th century serf is currently applied to your fiat liquidity. You view your plastic card as a modern convenience, a triumph of the new era. It is not a convenience. It is a 700-year-old shackle, redesigned for geometric advantage. When you tap your phone to pay for your coffee, you are executing the protocol. You are verifying the encrypted sigil, allowing the unseen sovereign to extract their fraction. The Templars did not vanish. They merely upgraded the architecture. They built the first network where capital moved faster than the military could confiscate it. The ghost in your modern banking server is a 14th century knight, charging you for the friction of your own survival. Inflation is not a natural economic weather event. It is a systemic extraction mechanism. It is the alchemical process of turning your labor into their sovereign wealth. The fiat printing press is simply the king's desperate attempt to alter the ledger he does not control. But the true architects know that he who controls the database controls the kingdom. To participate in this fiat architecture blindly is to accept the shackle. You are trading your finite time for their infinitely printable geometry. The system was not broken by greed. It was designed this way. A perfectly constructed trap of liquidity and debt, operating flawlessly for 7 centuries. Your reality is a crime scene. We are merely observing the bloodstains on the ledger. The illusion of the new era is that we have escaped the medieval constraints of power. We have not escaped. We simply digitized the vault. The ledger always balances. Make sure you aren't the currency.